July 1985, Moscow, USSR. A high-ranking KGB officer hurries through the streets, his heart pounding in his chest. He knows he's being followed, his own agency, the one he has served faithfully for years. His world is crumbling around him. The KGB has summoned him back to Moscow from London, where he had been serving as a diplomat. They claim it's for a routine debriefing, but he knows better. He's seen the signs, the subtle changes in his colleagues' behavior, the increased surveillance. They suspect him of treason, and he knows the consequences if he's caught. With no time to lose, he puts a plan into action. He sends a signal to his handlers, triggering a carefully orchestrated extraction operation. If it succeeds, he'll be whisked away to safety in the West. If it fails, he'll face certain death at the hands of the KGB. This is when Oleg Gordievsky found himself at the center of a dangerous game where the stakes couldn't be higher. Oleg Gordievsky was born on October 10, 1938 in Moscow, USSR, into a family deeply entrenched in the world of Soviet intelligence. His father, Anton Gordievsky, was a colonel in the NKVD, the notorious secret police agency that preceded the KGB. Anton had been a dedicated communist since the 1920s and had served in the NKVD during the Great Purge of the 1930s, a period marked by widespread repression, mass arrests, and executions under the leadership of Joseph Stalin. Growing up in the shadow of World War II and the early years of the Cold War, Oleg Gordievsky was immersed in an environment that prized loyalty to the state and the communist ideology above all else. As a child, he attended elite schools in Moscow, where he excelled academically and developed a keen interest in foreign languages, particularly English and German. In 1956, at the age of 18, Gordievsky enrolled in the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, a prestigious university known for training future diplomats and intelligence officers. During his studies, he focused on international law and foreign languages, honing the skills that would later prove invaluable in his career as a spy. Upon graduating from the MGIMO in 1962, Gordievsky followed in his father's footsteps and joined the KGB. He began his career in the Second Chief Directorate, the counterintelligence branch of the KGB, where he was tasked with identifying and neutralizing foreign spies operating within the Soviet Union. Gordievsky's talent for languages and his analytical skills quickly set him apart from his peers, and he rose steadily through the ranks of the organization. As Gordievsky gained more experience and exposure to the inner workings of the Soviet system, he began to develop doubts about the regime he served. He witnessed firsthand the corruption, oppression, and disregard for human rights that characterized the Soviet government. The KGB's methods, which often involved intimidation, blackmail, and violence, also troubled him deeply. It was during this time that Gordievsky began to seriously consider the possibility of defecting to the West. Gordievsky's disillusionment with the Soviet system was further reinforced by several key events during his early career. In 1968, he watched with growing unease as Warsaw Pact troops led by Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring, a period of political liberalization and reform. The brutal suppression of the Czech people's aspiration for greater freedom and democracy left a lasting impression on Gordievsky. Another important moment came in 1971 when Gordievsky was sent to East Berlin to assist in the interrogation of a Soviet defector named Oleg Lyalin. During the course of the interrogation, Lyalin revealed the existence of a secret KGB program aimed at subverting Western democracies through disinformation, propaganda, and the support of left-wing extremist groups. This revelation further eroded Gordievsky's fate in the Soviet system and its claimed moral superiority over the West. Despite his growing doubts, Gordievsky continued to serve in the KGB, earning a reputation as a skilled and reliable officer. In 1972, he was posted to the Soviet embassy in Copenhagen, Denmark, where his fluency in Danish and English made him a valuable asset. In the early 1970s, while serving as a KGB officer in Copenhagen, Denmark, Oleg Gordievsky made the life-altering decision to become a double agent for British intelligence MI6. His disillusionment with the Soviet system and his growing admiration for Western democracy had reached a tipping point, and he resolved to take action. Gordievsky's opportunity to make contact with MI6 came in 1974 when he was approached by a British diplomat named Richard Bromhead. Bromhead had been tasked by MI6 with identifying potential Soviet agents who might be willing to work for British intelligence. During their initial meeting, Gordievsky expressed his desire to cooperate with the British, citing his ideological opposition to the Soviet regime. Over the next several months, Gordievsky met regularly with his MI6 handlers, providing them with valuable insights into the inner workings of the KGB and Soviet foreign policy. He revealed details about Soviet espionage activities in Denmark and other Western European countries, as well as information about the KGB's methods for recruiting and handling agents. One of the most crucial pieces of intelligence Gordievsky provided to MI6 during this period was the identity of a high-ranking KGB officer named Stanislav Levchenko, who had been secretly working as a double agent for the Japanese. This information allowed British and American intelligence agencies to monitor Levchenko's activities and gain a deeper understanding of Soviet intelligence operations in the Far East. Gordievsky's cooperation with the MI6 took on even greater significance in 1982 when he was promoted to the position of KGB resident designate in London. In this role, he was responsible for overseeing all Soviet intelligence activities in the United Kingdom. Gordievsky used his position to pass a wealth of sensitive information to his British handlers, including details about Soviet military capabilities, nuclear weapon programs, and the identities of Soviet agents operating in Britain. Gordievsky's promotion came at a time of escalating tension between the USSR and the West. The early 1980s saw a resurgence of Cold War hostilities fueled by a number of factors. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 had drawn sharp condemnation from Western powers and led to a boycott of the 1980 Moscow Olympics by the United States and several of its allies. The election of Ronald Reagan as US President in 1980 also contributed to the heightened tensions. Reagan took a hardline stance against the Soviet Union, denouncing it as an evil empire.
Impulses of an evil empire to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding.
He launched a massive military buildup, including the development of new nuclear weapon systems, which raised fears of a renewed arms race between the superpowers. One of the most significant intelligence coups of Gordievsky's career came in 1984, when he provided MI6 with advance warnings of a major KGB operation known as Operation Ryan. This operation, which was launched in response to the Soviet leadership's growing fear of a surprise nuclear attack by the West, involved a massive effort to gather intelligence on Western military capabilities and intentions. Gordievsky's warning allowed British and American intelligence agencies to take steps to counter the operation and protect their sensitive information. Throughout his years as a double agent, Gordievsky lived in constant fear of being discovered by his KGB colleagues. He knew that the penalty for treason was death, and he took extraordinary precautions to maintain his cover. This included using dead drops and other secure communication methods to pass information to his MI6 handlers, as well as maintaining a facade of loyalty to the Soviet regime in his daily interactions with fellow KGB officers. The psychological toll of living a double life was immense, and Gordievsky often struggled with feelings of guilt, anxiety, and paranoia. He knew that a single mistake or moment of carelessness could expose him and put his life and the lives of his family members in jeopardy. Despite the constant stress and danger, Gordievsky remained committed to his role as a double agent, driven by his deep-seated belief in the superiority of Western values and his desire to help bring about the downfall of the Soviet system. His courage and dedication would ultimately prove to be a crucial factor in the outcome of the Cold War, as the intelligence he provided helped to shape the policies and strategies of the Western powers in their struggle against Soviet communism. However, unknown to Gordievsky and his MI6 handlers, a mole had infiltrated the highest levels of British intelligence. This mole, later revealed to be a high-ranking MI6 officer named Aldrich Ames, had been secretly working for the KGB since 1985. Ames had access to highly sensitive information about MI6's Soviet operations, including the identities of Soviet agents who were working for British intelligence. In April 1985, Ames passed information to his KGB handlers that exposed Gordievsky as a double agent. The KGB's second chief directorate, responsible for counterintelligence, began an investigation into Gordievsky's activities, gathering evidence of his betrayal. Gordievsky, meanwhile, was unaware that his cover had been blown. He continued to carry out his duties as KGB resident in London, meeting regularly with his MI6 handlers and passing along intelligence. However, he began to notice signs that something was amiss. He received a series of cryptic messages from Moscow urging him to return to the Soviet Union for a consultation. He also spotted surveillance teams following him around London, suggesting that the KGB was monitoring his movements. In July 1985, Oleg Gordievsky found himself in a desperate situation. His cover as a double agent had been blown, and he was now facing the full wrath of the KGB. Knowing that he had little time before he would be arrested and likely executed, Gordievsky made the decision to attempt a daring escape from the Soviet Union. The operation to extract Gordievsky was a complex and risky one, requiring careful coordination between MI6 and its allies in the region. The plan called for Gordievsky to make his way to the Soviet-Finnish border, where he would be met by a team of MI6 officers and smuggled across the border into Finland. To set the plan in motion, Gordievsky first had to convince his KGB superiors to allow him to take a short trip to Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, ostensibly to visit his ailing mother. Once there, he would make his way to the Finnish border, where he would rendezvous with his MI6 contacts. On the day of the operation, Gordievsky boarded a train from Moscow to Leningrad, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. He knew that the KGB would be watching his every move and that any slip-up could cost him his life. As the train sped through the Russian countryside, Gordievsky made his way to the dining car, where he had arranged to meet with a fellow MI6 agent. The agent passed him a set of keys and a map, which would guide him to a hidden location near the Finnish border. Once in Leningrad, Gordievsky made his way to the designated spot, a secluded woodland area just a few kilometers from the border. There, he was met by a team of MI6 officers who quickly bundled him into a waiting car and sped off towards the frontier. The journey to the border was a nerve-wracking one, with the MI6 team constantly on the lookout for any sign of KGB pursuit. At one point, they were forced to take a detour through a dense forest, the car bouncing and jostling over the rough terrain. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the border crossing point. Gordievsky, his heart in his throat, handed over his forged passport to the Finnish border guards, praying that they would not detect any irregularities. To his immense relief, the guards waved him through without incident, and he found himself safely on Finnish soil. From there, he was quickly whisked away to a safe house, where he was debriefed by MI6 officers and given a chance to catch his breath. Meanwhile, back in Moscow, Gordievsky's wife and two young daughters were facing their own ordeal. The KGB, realizing that Gordievsky has fled, had placed them under house arrest and were subjecting them to intense interrogation. Knowing that their safety was at risk, MI6 launched a second operation to extract Gordievsky's family from the Soviet Union. This time, the plan involved smuggling them out of the country via a series of safe houses and secret routes. The operation was a tense and dangerous one, with MI6 officers constantly on the move to avoid detection by the KGB. At one point, Gordievsky's wife and daughters were forced to hide in a secret compartment in the floor of a safe house as KGB agents searched the building. Finally, after several weeks of careful planning and execution, Gordievsky's family was safely reunited with him in the United Kingdom. The reunion was an emotional one, with tears of joy and relief flowing freely. That's the end of the video. If you enjoyed watching it, please do not forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.